So before we get into too many of the details, it has been a while since we've done one of these live streams, and also it's been a while since we've announced a new product, and more importantly, an all-new product. And so, really quick, I'm going to point that out, that I'm not sure people quite differentiate between that term when we say something is all new or something is new. You know, a lot of times when it's all new, in this case, it is exactly that. It's all new. It's a model we've never done before. It's not a refresh or a repaint or an update or a V2 or a variation of something that we had before. All new means exactly that. It's an all new model. So this is an all new design that's never been offered before. We've never offered this subject matter before. We've never offered this model before. So that's why we call it all new, versus sometimes we'll apply that term new instead. So we'll say this is the, new turbo timber evolution, because it's not exactly an all new model that replaced the existing turbo timber. It's not an all new model that, started fresh from scratch. So it's a new model of an existing product that we've updated and upgraded. Sorry, Tom was bumping in, checking on a couple things. So back real quick on that. All new means exactly that again. It's all new design from the ground up. If it's a new model, a lot of times it will be an update or a tweak to an existing product. So we recently announced the P47 1.2 meter. It wasn't all new. It was essentially the exact same airframe we had before, even the same trim scheme. The only thing we did is we had to change the electronics because we couldn't get the old AR636 receiver anymore. We of course added a new generation 631 receiver and also a smart ESC as well. And so that's why we called it the new P47 and not the all new P47. If we did a different size, let's say a 1 meter P47, it would be the all new P47 1 meter. And so that's why this is an all new model. That's why we've been teasing it as all new. And we have seen, some of the comments on social media in particular, people saying, oh, it's probably just another timber. Oh, it's probably just another repaint. And I think they maybe missed the fact that we did specifically say something all new from E-flite lands on 8/17, but that's exactly what that means. So we had a little bit of fun with the teaser, but to be honest, these things sometimes are a bit hit and miss. The consumers, there was a lot of positive response, there was some negative response. Some of those comments about it not being anything new, that's unfortunate. But at the same time, I think some people picked up on the hints that we gave. So for those that did see the teaser, we wanted it to do two things. Number one, we wanted to make it clear that something new was coming, so people were ready to see it on Thursday. Number two, we wanted them to maybe be a little bit aware of, but also maybe confused by what the potential subject matter is. So we don't actually show the product in the video footage. We do show its shadow. If you zoom in close, you can kind of tell the shape. You can kind of hear the sound that it's a twin. We also did show the Habu logo. I've got that here. We'll talk about this decal here in a minute. We show the Habu logo, and that was partly a misdirect just for fun on our part. We've had Habu sport jets for many, many years. We wanted some people to think it was another Habu, maybe a twin Habu. Not many people immediately picked up on the fact that a twin Habu has existed in full-scale aviation, and that is one of the nicknames given to the SR-71 Blackbird that you guys see here. And so we had a little bit of fun with that, and we're really excited because I think some people got it, and that's great. Of course, we haven't confirmed anything, but it's been fun to see people guess it right. Some people thinking it's a larger 80mm, 90mm Habu sport jet, or even an ultra micro Habu. Good news is I think people are bringing those up because they want to see them down the road, so that's kind of nice to see. And I think hopefully we'll surprise and hopefully even excite some of the people who didn't have the positive comments, the ones that said, oh, another timber, oh, another repaint. I think it's fun to create buzz and create excitement because we do think this is going to be exciting to a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And so I already see some excitement here in the chat that it's an SR-71. I know a lot of people have been wanting a model of this for some time. And I know that some people are going to see this, they're going to love the fact that it's an SR-71, and they're going to be maybe a little bit disappointed that it's not a smaller, say UMX, or even a larger twin 64 or twin 70mm model. If this model does well, by all means, we can certainly consider scaling it down, scaling it up. You guys know we've done that with Timbers and Ultra Sticks and Vipers and a lot of different models over the years. So if this particular size and price point performs well in the market because of the subject matter, then I think we can definitely look at blowing it up, giving it more features like retracts and some other things that people would appreciate on a larger scale model, or maybe scaling it down to a UMX, which can be flown in still smaller spaces and be even more affordable. I see riders, hobby shops asking about afterburners. It doesn't have them, but something kind of cool, and not necessarily intentional, but you'll see that we did anodize the motors orange, the Spektrum brand motors. And it's kind of neat because when you look at it from the tail end, you do kind of see that almost semi-afterburner look. It's kind of a nice little touch. It does not have those. They are outrunner motors, and so I don't know that it'll be possible for anyone to add any of those simulated afterburners to the tail end, but we'll see. Maybe the market will come up with something. That would be pretty cool if they do. Yeah, I see a lot of excitement. This is awesome to see. We're really excited about this for a long time. I will buy and push any size of SR-71 that gets released. That's awesome to hear. And so you'll see that I do have it on the table next to the F-14 that a lot of you guys have been selling for some time now because they are the same class of model. They're both twin 40mm EDFs. And in this case, essentially, it's the same electronics. Of course, the flight control is programmed differently for the SR-71 than it was in the F-14. The F-14 had swing wings. The SR-71 is a little more simple, which we'll talk about here in a little bit when it comes to the controls. And the big reason that we've chosen this size and this class of model for both the F-14 and the SR-71 to start is because it's designed around that very common, very popular 4S 2200 milliamp battery that lots of people already have in their battery box. If they don't, they're relatively inexpensive and easy to find if they need to get one to fly these models with. And the nice thing is they're large enough that we can have nice scale detail, good performance, good presence, but also they're not too large and too complex to put them at a price point or to require an amount of space that's a little bit unreasonable for a lot of people to fly them on. So the goal here was to have kind of the meat of the market, to have models that were priced and sized and use a battery that's very popular so the widest audience possible will hopefully enjoy these models. We wanted to make them more accessible, more practical, so on and so forth. I know some people have said, well, why didn't you just do UMX then? Well, you know, UMX has some limitations, and at the same time we couldn't do quite as much as we did with these if we had scaled them down to the next size down, the UMXs. So these are not UMX class models. They're twin 40mm EDF. They use again a 4-cell 2200, and I didn't bring one today, but essentially this is the same class as a single 64mm model would be. So our F-15 64mm uses the same 4-cell 2200 milliamp battery. Of course that's a single, but it's a similar size, similar price, similar performance to these twin 40mm models. So that's kind of why we chose. Oh, I see we already have a challenge accepted on the afterburners. That'll be cool. Please do share that with us if you are able to get that working and looking good. So I'll go ahead and hold it up so you guys can see a little bit better the size relativity to me. We got another one back here just on the stand to look cool. And as you can see, they are similar in overall kind of volume, but of course the SR is a fair bit longer than the F-14, but at the same time, when you've got the wings swept back, the F-14 is similar in overall wingspan to the SR. Of course, you can have longer wingspan with the F-14 if you extend the wings all the way out. The SR, though, is kind of neat because although a lot of jets tend to have a small wingspan relative to their length, the SR-71 is almost twice as long as the wingspan is. So it's a pretty large model, and it's maybe a little hard to tell, but the box is a good-sized box. It's not huge by any means. It's relatively thin, which is kind of nice. It just presents a little bit differently than the box for the F-14, and it does come in the box with the fins off and with the landing gear off. So we do mention in our marketing materials it arrives nearly fully factory assembled, and that's because you do have to pop the fins on, but they just pop into place. And that's a really nice feature. The landing gear, if you want to use it, it's optional use. You can hand launch it and belly land it on grass. The landing gear just snaps into place. You don't have to have any tools, no special circumstances. They just kind of slide into the slots on the bottom there. You've got the main gear, and then of course the nose gear is a separate unit. But you can see you can just pop these right out. So if you want to remove them or install them on the fly at the field, it's very quick and easy to do. The nose wheel just slides into the slot here, and it is a steerable nose wheel. So if you are flying from hard surfaces, if you've got a nice paved runway, you do have that steerable nose wheel, which does have its own servo. So you've got that steering control. This model does not have rudders. It is small enough that it wasn't really practical to put those on there. Would not probably have made a huge difference in the flight performance and capabilities of this particular model. So like the F-14, it's relatively simple, which again was important to us because we wanted it to be a little bit more accessible to a wider audience, a bit more affordable, a bit more practical by being a bit more simple, which we know some people aren't going to love that. We understand that. And we're going to hear that comment a lot probably when we announce this tomorrow. But again, if this one does well, by all means, we could certainly consider, who knows, twin 90s or something crazy like that. Maybe not that crazy, but just larger than twin 40mm and with retracts and rudders and all the fun bits and pieces. So it's a good sized aircraft. It does have nice finger grips here to hand launch it. It is easier to hand launch than the F-14. So admittedly, you know, one of the things that I've seen a lot of people struggle with when it comes to the F-14 is hand launching it. It looks awesome without the wheels on it. It flies faster, it has better vertical. Both models just look a lot cooler without the landing gear installed, but not everybody can hand launch the F-14 well, and in part that's because it's so wide, it's really hard for people to grip it properly. And it's hard for them to launch it properly. You know, hand launching is not for everyone. Not everybody can hand launch properly or well. Not everybody can throw a baseball or throw a football well. I've been hand launching models since I was a kid, so for me it's become second nature. The big thing is a lot of people, they tend to lob or lob off at an angle. They don't extend their arm out. You really just need to extend your arm and follow through, and it launches very easy. And then you'll see in the video that just like the F-14, the SR-71 does have the what we call automatic hand launch assist mode built in. So when you are launching it, when you're hand launching it, you'd have the landing gear removed, of course. You don't want to have the landing gear on there if you're hand launching it. You remove the landing gear, you have it in your hand, you're ready to launch, and if you have it in Safe Select, if you have Safe Select turned on, when you throw it, the flight controller senses the G-forces of that throwing motion, and it automatically enables that hand launch assist mode. So now at full throttle, when you launch that, the hand launch assist mode is going to add a bit more up elevator, and it makes it climb out a bit faster and a bit more. So if your launch isn't necessarily the best, it'll help even more than just Safe alone would. So Safe on most of our aircraft that have Safe Select, at full throttle, they climb a little bit. At half throttle, they mostly maintain altitude. At less than half, they come down at a relatively low rate. With the automatic hand launch assist mode, it increases the angle of climb at full throttle for the first few seconds after that launch. Then once it gets, you know, after a couple seconds, it gets up to hopefully 100 feet, give or take a little more. It starts to level off. Now, we say level off, but it really ends up, if you're still at full throttle, climbing just a little bit, just not as much as it did at the beginning of the hand launch. And then it kind of lowers itself, the angle of climb out. And then you can either continue to climb out with Safe, or you can turn Safe off, which is what a lot of us more experienced pilots will do. And we will talk about the skill level required for this here in a little bit. But the nice thing is that is built in with the optional use Safe Select. You have that automatic hand launch assist mode. And this is definitely easier to hand launch than the F-14 is, in part because of those nice grips on the bottom. You can see the finger holes, which are pretty much right at the CG. There's some hard points mounted in there to make it give you a little bit more leverage. And yeah, it is, again, easier to hand launch. It's not necessarily easy to hand launch. I'm not going to say that everybody's going to be able to hand launch this airplane well. I can't promise that everybody can hand launch every airplane well, because some people are better at it than others. And those that are struggling with, you know, hand launching any EDF jets may struggle with these as well, even with the hand launch assist mode. Some people get away with not hand launching properly or well when they're hand launching something that's more lightly loaded or more overpowered. These models both have plenty of power. They're no slouches. You know, the F-14 does almost 100 miles per hour with the gear off in level flight, and this is about 80 miles per hour. So they're not underpowered by any stretch. But if you don't throw it well enough, they don't have excess power to pull out. You have to hand launch it properly, hand launch it well. And we do cover that in the manual a bit. We're going to show that in our videos, and you'll even see product developer David Payne in the video. He hand launches it without holding the transmitter. He just hand launches it and doesn't even throw it hard or anything. Then the one thing you'll notice, he extends his arm, he follows through. That's how you properly hand launch an airplane, and it climbs out exactly the way you expect. He picks up the transmitter and flies it back towards himself. And so we don't recommend hand launching without holding the transmitter, of course, but it shows how well that option to use Safe Select with the automatic hand launch assist mode does work when you hand launch it properly. So a lot of cool things there. It is an all EPO airframe. So just like the F-14 is not EPS foam like ultramicros, that's another reason we chose these larger sized, larger class models. EPO, of course, is more durable. It does hold up a bit better to handling in general, but an important note is it is fully painted black. So please help us get the word out to your customers, to anybody you can. It is a black painted airplane. You should not leave it out in direct sunlight. As we've all seen with dark painted cockpits and even dark trim on some models or darker painted in general models, if you leave them in the direct sunlight for too long, they can gator, as we call it. The foam can bubble up and it doesn't look so good. So just keep it in the shade. It's not hard to do. It's not that big of a model. If you have to, you can always put it back in the box in between flights by popping the fins off, especially if you already have the gear off. Just keep it out of direct sunlight and you're going to be rewarded with a great looking model. And I have to admit, there are a lot of surface details here. Let's see if I can show you on the close-up camera. There's a ton. I'm not sure it's focusing very well, but there is a lot of surface detail. We've got panel lines. We've got all kinds of neat details throughout. Molded in there, as technologies improve and we all gain more experience with these molded foam aircraft, we're able to now get these even smoother finishes. This really doesn't look like foam. Most people, if I handed this to them, would not immediately assume this is a foam aircraft. It looks so good. The foam is so dense now. The finish is so smooth with the paint that it almost looks like a composite model. But again, it is all EPO and then fully painted on top of that. So you'll see the bottom, of course, is painted as well. Now, one benefit to it being painted black is that it looks cool. It looks just like the full scale. We actually debated painting it a different color, like some of the other models of the SR-71, some of the earlier ones, and that were more silver. But we were like, this is the SR-71 Blackbird. It's got to be black. But along with that comes the downside, which is it's hard to see. The F-14 being all gray and the size that it is and as fast as it is already a bit hard to see, especially with the wing swept back. This is a bit harder to see. So for that reason, we include in the box a second set of vertical fins. So we've got the scale looking black ones, which have the Habu markings from the 17958, which was a full scale aircraft. And not all of them had that marking on there, but we chose this one because it just added a little bit more interesting detail work to it. And in the box, we have these red fins. They're just red. They don't have any decals on them. And it's amazing just how much of a difference only the fins make. By adding these to the model in place of the black fins, and I'm going to show you how easy it is. So again, I mentioned when you pull it out of the box, you have to pop the fins into place. These fins just pop right back out, pop right out, no tool required. And so if you wanted to, you can swap them on the fly, or when you pop it out of the box, you can choose the color you want to install, and then you pop it into place here. And you can see it snaps into place very nice and easy. But look at that. You can probably even just see in this video. I mean, it's a night and day difference in just the overall visibility by having that red fin. And also it really helps with your orientation. So you'll see in the video that we'll publish tomorrow, most of the video is flown with the black fins, but towards the end of the video, we show some footage of it flying with the red fins, some rolls and some other aerobatics. You can see it's a bit easier to orient. Now the red is not scale, but we chose red because A, it stands out, and B, it kind of matches these other red details that are on the airplane already. So it doesn't look horrible with those on there. And again, you can easily fly with those, and then if you don't like the way it looks on the ground with the red fins, no problem, pop it right back off, and then pop the black fin back into place. So nice little touch. Those are in the box. There's no extra expense. You don't have to buy those separately or paint up fins on your own. They are included. Something else we include in the box is this optional use Habu decal. So there are Habu markings already on the black vertical fins, and then you can add this to the nose if you want to. We chose not to put that on there because we think some people may not like that. But yes, like the full scale, you can add that decal on the nose if you want to. We had a bit of fun too. We recently released the Twin Timber, which some people affectionately call the Twimber. So we've been joking the last few days about this being the Twabu, the twin Habu, which it is, although it is a Blackbird. Again, one of the nicknames was Habu, and that is derived from when it was deployed in Japan in particular. Some of the locals there felt it looked like a particular pit viper snake, Habu. And one of the guys, I believe, that was stationed over there actually drew this Habu. And there's some other artwork that he drew as well, which is really cool. It's kind of a neat story behind that, but it is the Blackbird, just the Habu being another nickname for it. All right. Yeah, words cannot describe how excited I am. I love hearing that. We love seeing that. Appreciate it. Yes, good call on the red fins. Yeah, I think that was a really, really good idea by our PD guys. Casey Brake just joined us, and his question is, which I haven't really answered yet, what is required to make this ready to fly? So, like the F-14 and also like our ultra micro aircraft. Again, these are not UMX aircraft. They're not ultra micro extreme or ultra micro class. They're bigger than that. But like those models, they have flight controllers already installed that have a receiver, and in this case, 2 ESCs. Then the servos are separate, but the flight controller does require the use of a Spektrum DSM-X or DSM-2 compatible transmitter. So you cannot, these are not sold in a plug-and-play version at all. You cannot use other brand radios, Futaba, so on and so forth. So you do have to have a Spektrum transmitter. You need at least a 5-channel transmitter. Now, some people will say, oh, that means I could use my old DX5E or my DXE or my DXS. Technically, you could. All of the programming that's required is already built into the flight control. Now, it does have a little bit of mixing going on. So you can hopefully see here, and I'll fire it up. I'll connect it to the radio here in a little bit. But it does have ailerons on the outside that function just like ailerons. And then it has an elevator, but also to give it better elevator authority, when you use the elevator, we mix the ailerons with the elevator, essentially creating elevons. So all 4 of these surfaces move up and down for elevator versus just the outer 2 move for ailerons. So that mixing is taken care of in the flight controller automatically. I just set up a brand new model in my NX8 just a few minutes ago before I started the video, and I don't have to touch anything. It's already done and programmed for this model. I don't have to change a single setting. The only thing I have to do to program my radio for this model is dual rates and exponential if I want to, most of which is personal preference. We have some recommendations in the manual, but again, you don't even have to do that if you don't want to, although I would recommend probably setting up at least like a 70% mid rate or 50% low rate if you have triple rates. Some people don't prefer hot controls, some people prefer hot controls. We try to find a balance between experienced and inexperienced guys or less experienced guys and what works best for them. But you do need at least a 5-channel transmitter. We're recommending on the low end at least a DX6E, even though you could technically use a DXS. It is a 7-channel transmitter and you only need 5. But yeah, I'm using my NX8, and this is my shameless plug as always, that I know a lot of people when they're looking for their first real radio consider the DX6E or the NX6 because that is more feature rich than say the DXS that came with the ready to fly trainer. But a lot of people outgrow the 6-channel and even 7-channel like the NX6 is essentially. They outgrow those very quickly. 8 channels, they will not outgrow. So I strongly recommend DX80 is a good lower cost alternative, but the NX8 is my favorite recommendation. I use this daily with pretty much all of my E-flite aircraft. I do have an IX-14 now for my higher channel count, more complex models, but for almost every E-flite model I fly, this gets the job done more than well enough. It works great for this model, and again, it's very easy to set up the radio for this. So it does come out of the box bind and fly basic, which means no battery, no charger. You do, of course, then need a 4-cell 2200 milliamp battery. It will work with a 30C battery, and we proved that with the F-14. It's essentially the same power system. It's pulling around 35 to 40 amps, so a 30C 2200, which can do up to 66 amps continuously, can handle that. Now, that said, a 50 or 100C battery works even better. In EDF jets, generally speaking, 30C can often get the job done. The battery might run a little hot, especially on a hot day. The 50 and 100C run a bit cooler, maybe give you a little bit more performance, a little bit higher voltage under load, so you get a little more RPM out of the motors. You don't need 50C or 100C in either of these models, but you need at least 30C. That will do it. In this case, I'm showing right here a Spektrum 4S 2200 30C G2 LiPo. Of course, you can use a G1 LiPo. It's the exact same battery, just with a balance connector instead. I do have one of my old G1 2200 100Cs here, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it in the video, but our 100C and 50C batteries are a little bit longer than the 30C batteries. So you'll see there, when I match up the ends, you got a little bit more length, or if I match up the wires here, you can see the length difference there. So this model and the F-14, a slightly longer battery is no big deal. The one benefit of the slightly longer battery, slightly heavier 50 and 100C batteries is they add a little more nose weight to this model, which is not a bad thing because of the Delta planform. CG is a bit more critical. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But again, 30C gets the job done, 50 and 100C are even better yet. I know a lot of people are going to maybe bring up the fact that with the F14, they felt like they had to use a smart LiPo battery. So hopefully you guys can help us debunk this. You do not have to use smart LiPo batteries with any of our aircraft. Just because they are smart telemetry equipped or have an IC3 smart compatible connector, you don't have to use smart batteries in any of our models. Both of these models, if you use a non-smart battery, you get the exact same telemetry data. They don't have the third wire to the ESC that full smart batteries have, of course, but that's okay because just with the two main power leads with a general battery, you still get overall battery voltage, you get the current draw, you get the RPM of the motor, so on and so forth. So you don't need a smart battery. What I think some people were misunderstanding was that yes, these models were both designed around our smart LiPos. Our smart LiPo batteries tend to be physically smaller and lighter than a lot of similar class batteries. So other brand 4-cell 2200s may be a little bit thicker, a little bit wider, a little bit longer, a little bit heavier, and they may not fit in these models. We didn't do that intentionally. We didn't, purposely design these aircraft to only accept smart LiPo batteries. That's a misconception in the market. We designed them to be as compact as possible to fit these batteries well because we have these. These are what we recommend. These are what we use. These work very well in these applications. It doesn't mean you have to use them. There are some other brand batteries that will also fit. My recommendation, if you have a consumer who's not sure if they want to buy it because they want to know if their batteries fit, you can either look up the dimensions of this, recommend they look up the dimensions of the Spektrum, smart batteries, 4-cell 2200, 30C, 50, 100Cs on our website. Look up those dimensions and compare them to their battery. If their battery's a little longer, it will fit. If it's a little wider, it'll probably be okay, or a little thicker, it'll probably be okay. But some of the other, especially lower cost off-brand batteries tend to be much larger, much heavier. They may not fit. And so, that's an important thing to bring up with consumers. Of course, you will need a charger then. And if a person is new to smart LiPos in particular, this S155, as you guys know, is like the best thing to recommend, bang for the buck. It does up to 4 cells. It's up to 55 watts. It's AC. It's super convenient. It has the IC3 and the IC5. That's a very nice touch. Even if a person already has a bunch of other non-smart chargers, this is a good way to get them into that smart charger ecosystem. And something else that we're learning, and we've kind of seen this over the last few years, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this too. Not everybody, especially experienced airplane guys, tend to be interested in smart LiPos just yet. But what I've noticed is if I get them to try one G1 smart LiPo battery, they will tend to find that A, they enjoy the lower, the slightly lower weight of the battery, slightly smaller size. They get good flight times. They end up getting good cycles if they use it for long enough. And they compare the performance to their other brand batteries and they go, you know what, these are good. These perform well in most of my applications. And then on top of that, they get to experience that automatic self-discharge. And that's nice. For people that have been using LiPos like myself for over 20 years now, I know the number one way to kill my batteries is to leave them fully charged. So I used to be like crazy about if I don't fly my batteries at the field, I would rush home and put all my dischargers out and get all my batteries discharged to storage voltage before I could go to bed that night. It was a huge hassle. Now with smart LiPos, I don't have to worry about that. They come out of the box programmed for 72 hours. It's important you let people know that because I know some people bought their first smart LiPo battery, charged it, and then a week later went to fly it, it was half discharged. And they're like, what happened? Well, exactly what was supposed to happen happened. After 72 hours, it self-discharged itself to half charge. And that's best for long-term storage to keep your battery in the best shape possible to last as long as possible. So once they experience that, they really start to go, oh man, good performance, lightweight, small size, I get the automatic discharging, and then if you can get them to buy a smart charger and they get to see how easy it is to just plug in the battery, even if it's a G1, they got to plug in the balance connector, but everything else on the charger is taken care of for them. It sets the current and so on and so forth. And then when you go to G2 batteries, and I'll admit, I was a little apprehensive at first to switch over from G1s with the balance connector. I used LiPos before balance connectors and balancing were a thing. And then it became just complete commonplace for almost 2 decades that it was a little hard for me to get convinced. But I got to tell you, these G2s are so nice. Plug it in, and I look at the screen just to make sure everything's right, and that's honestly just my old school paranoia. It's always set right every time. Every once in a while, I'll walk over to the charger, I'll check my cell balance, by scrolling down a screen, and man, it's so nice. Plug it in, one plug, one connector, no settings, and it charges the battery for me. And I pretty much religiously charge my batteries now at 2C or even 3C. No harm is done to these batteries at 2 or 3C over 1C. And of course, 2C is half the charge time of 1C, 3C is a third the charge time. After that, it's kind of getting to the point of diminishing returns, so I don't really tell people to go to 4 or 5C typically. But 2C or 3C, I have all my batteries set for. It's really nice to just plug and go when it comes to that. So, see if we've got any other questions here real quick. Yeah, Casey Brake, good question. What is the highest milliamp hour you can use? Always get people asking me this. You know, it's interesting. The product development guys and I have this debate often. They're like, you know, this is the best battery. This is the only battery that we recommend for this model. And you'll notice we often recommend a range of capacity for a lot of our models. We'll say 3-cell 2200 to a 4-cell 5000. For example, the Turbo Timber Evolution has that very wide range. The PD guys all love flying it on a 4-cell 3200. That's our recommended battery. But what we've learned is people may not have that battery. They may have 2200s and they may have a 5000. Or, yes, it's not uncommon for people to shove the biggest battery they possibly can into our airplanes to fly as long as they can. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that the higher capacity battery is almost always heavier. Maybe it makes the aircraft nose heavy, which is not necessarily a good thing. I know some people believe nose heavy is better. No, nose heavy is not always better. Of course, too tail heavy to fly is bad. You crash. Very tail heavy and still flyable can be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. You know, you want the CG around the range that we recommend. That tends to be a safe conservative range. If you go nose heavy past that, you tend to have other issues. Now you don't have enough elevator authority to flare on landing. When you're coming in, it's bouncing a lot. It might nose over when you're taxiing around. So again, too nose heavy is a bad thing. In this case, there is not a lot of room in the battery compartment for a larger, higher capacity battery. We designed it around a 4-cell 2200, gets about 4 to 5 minutes of flight time, maybe a little less if you fly harder. You could also extend it out a little bit longer. If someone was to find a, you know, say 26 or 2700 that has similar width and height to these 2200s, but it's just a little bit longer, that would probably work. We aren't aware of any, and we don't sell a battery in that particular size just yet, so we only recommend up to a 2200. But as long as their battery can fit in the battery compartment and it doesn't make it too nose heavy, and obviously it can't be too tail heavy, then it can work. But we don't recommend beyond 2200s ourselves at this point. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody comes up with a battery that might be higher capacity and work. One thing I'll show you really quick is that the battery compartment is here on the bottom. It's got a magnetic hatch, which is nice and easy. It's black, so hopefully people don't lose that. You just slide the battery into the compartment all the way to the front. And so we have a little sticker inside that says exactly that. It says here, with recommended battery, push the battery all the way forward. Now the reason we say with the recommended battery is because if you use a different brand battery that's heavier and still fits, you may not want it all the way forward because that may be a little too nose heavy. But it is something that we do mention in the manual. We do recommend that you take extra care on the CG of this model because as a Delta Wing model, and there you can hopefully see, I've got the battery in the compartment all the way in there, and I've pushed it all the way forward until it stops. So you can see there's a little bit of space. I can wiggle the battery around a little bit. So if a battery is a little bit wider or a little bit thicker, just a hair, than our smart lipos, they might fit. You can always have somebody bring in the battery to try it in the store. You slide the battery really forward, you're gonna use this Velcro strap to strap it into place, and then that will hopefully give you the CG that's recommended. Now again, CG is more critical on this model than it is with other models because it's a Delta Wing. Flying wings and Delta Wings are very critical when it comes to CG. If you have the CG too far back on a flying wing and you launch it or try to take off, it'll just literally sometimes flip end over end. A Delta Wing model like this is a little more forgiving, but if you get the CG too far back, it'll tend to pitch up really bad, or it'll kind of get stuck in high alpha and kind of drag the tail end around. So the CG is a bit more critical on this. You do not want it tail heavy. If you get it too tail heavy, you can get those weird behaviors. You can get into spins that are really difficult to recover from. One interesting thing is we noticed that in our spin testing, it spins pretty flat because of the plan form. It almost always comes down and pretty much just lands on its belly without landing on a wingtip or on the nose or on the tail. Doesn't really tend to break anything, and that's kind of a nice touch. But we hope people don't experience those spins because they use the recommended battery and or definitely use the recommended point for the CG. So I know a lot of information there. Yeah, and that's a very good point about smart lipos. And I will say this, that I think if someone's new to the hobby, they should definitely just go smart if they can. I want people to learn how to use a battery and care for it properly. But unfortunately, a lot of consumers, especially people that are new to our hobby, they just don't do that. They don't understand the importance, especially out of the gate. Smart helps keep them safer. As an experienced pilot who's been using lipos again for over 2 decades, I know all the ins and outs of lipos, and I do feel safer with smart stuff because I know that it's going to take care of it for me. But at the same time, I understand some experienced guys that are out there are not comfortable with smart just yet. I totally get that. We totally get that. That's why we're going to continue to sell the G1 batteries so they can, test them out with the balance connector. And then down the road, when they get comfortable, man, the G2 it doesn't get much easier than that. So that part's pretty exciting. So I am going to go ahead and turn it on real quick to show you guys some of those controls. So I'm going to turn on my transmitter here. Now, just like the F14, it is already set up with Safe Select on. It's enabled, but you can turn it on and off with channel 5. So on almost all Spektrum transmitters, 6 channels and above computer transmitters, channel 5 gear channel is almost always assigned to this big switch in the back. This is the A switch. Back here. Now you can move that to the B switch, which I usually do for a lot of my aircraft because this typically is my gear switch if an aircraft has retracts. This model does not have retracts. We talked earlier about why that is, too small for them. So if someone is not comfortable with that switch being their switch for Safe Select, they can just reassign channel 5. You can't change the channel on these models that Safe Select is assigned to. It's always on channel 5. But you can move it to the B switch or whatever switch they prefer. But in this case, I haven't changed anything. I just left it on the A switch to show you guys. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, and I'm going to show you one of my favorite features. I know a lot of guys are like, oh, I don't need telemetry. I've been flying 150 years, and telemetry is not important, or whatever it might be. And hey, I've been flying for, over 30 years, and I didn't need telemetry, but there are a lot of really cool things that come about with it. So one of the nice things is that we have a feature that works with, again, all batteries. It's not, whether it's smart or not, it doesn't matter. It's looking at the overall voltage of the battery. And so I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, turn this back on, plug this in, flip it right side up and show you, again, one of my favorite things. And this has saved me and other people that I know of from taking off with a battery that was not fully charged. So once it links, right now it's not, now it's linked, I'm going to show you one of my favorite alerts that I get with telemetry. I hope you guys can see that on the screen there. It's basically telling me smart battery alarm, battery not charged for flying, 14.7 volts. This battery is at storage charge. And so I've done this where I've accidentally grabbed a battery that was not fully charged, put it in the model, and this warning kept me from taking off with a partially charged, partially discharged battery and potentially crashing or running out of juice a little bit too soon. That is a really great alert that you get with telemetry. And that works on pretty much all of our aircraft that have either smart electronics and or the telemetry. Again, that works with smart batteries or non-smart. It doesn't matter. It's just looking at the overall battery voltage. And if it's below basically about 4 volts per cell or about 16 volts on a 4-cell battery, that alert comes into play. I am going to show you that with that switch, the A switch, right now, all the way to the back, safe is on. And you can see safe is on because when I bank it, the ailerons are trying to level the ailerons, not quite the elevons yet. We'll talk about that here in a second, but they're trying to level the aircraft back out. Now, if I turn safe off, you'll see they'll go right back to neutral. So now it's just AS3X. AS3X is not active because I haven't gone past 25% throttle yet. But again, you can see Safe Select is enabled. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off though and show you now those controls. So hopefully you can see this pretty good here. So there's aileron. You can see I've got just the outer surfaces moving with aileron control, but now I'm going to pull back on the elevator. All 4 of the surfaces are moving. And that's important. You need that extra elevator authority. You don't need as much ailerons because the wingspan is not much, but it's a very large, long aircraft, so you really need all that pitching action. So all of that mixing is done in the controller. There's nothing that has to be programmed in the radio to make that happen. It does it automatically for you with aileron and elevator. And then as we noted before, it does have the steerable nose wheel on the rudder channel. So you can taxi around on a smooth surface and take off on a smooth surface. And That is the 4 channels, plus then safe is 5. Of course, there is the throttle. I didn't run it up yet, but it does have a really cool sound. It's pretty darn fast, like we talked about earlier in the video. It is about 80 miles per hour in level flight with the gear removed. It's about 65 miles per hour with the gear installed. So yes, there's a big difference on both of these aircraft in the speed, the vertical performance, and then even the overall flight time, especially if you throttle back, because the gear is pretty draggy. And I know this is an argument for why don't you just put retracts? Well, again, these sizes of model are not really suited for retracts. Then that would also require you to fly from a pretty smooth surface. It adds weight, it adds complexity, it adds cost. Sure, we can definitely consider larger models with retracts down the road, but of course in that case you still would probably have to fly even a twin 64 one of these or a twin 70 off of only a paved runway. I highly doubt, unless we put really oversized, goofy looking wheels on and tires on, it probably isn't going to fly out of grass, even with the larger size and those retracts. So, that's why we went with this kind of arrangement. Also, a really quick note, this is kind of a fun feature here. Some may have noticed that the tires are silver or gray. And for those that don't know, the full-scale aircraft actually had aluminum-infused tires. So the original rubber tires would pretty much get too hot and fail, and so they infused them with aluminum. Now, they did not do the nose. We did it on the nose here because it was more expensive to make those in blacks. If somebody's really bothered by that, they could potentially maybe dye those black instead. So the nose tires were not aluminum infused, but the main tires were. So we had that nice little touch on there. And there are the 3 wheels on each axle for the mains, which is pretty cool. And you'll see in the video, it actually takes off. It's really cool the way it rotates and climbs out, and then takeoffs and landings on the gear are actually very, very nice. I like flying it that way. I know some people do not like the way it looks with the gear hanging off of it, but I think it's really, a nice experience to taxi out, take off, and land. I would love to have retracts. I get that. Again, we can consider putting that on a larger model. But it is nice that you have that option. I also recommend, and I recommended this with the F-14, and I know it bit some people, even if you plan on hand launching longer term, you should make your first couple of flights with the wheels installed off of a smooth surface. Go to, even if you have to drive a little longer or a little farther, recommend to your customer, don't go to that park that you want to fly it at and hand launch the first time. Go to the flying field, go wherever you have to go to use the wheels to do your first couple flights with typical, rise off the ground, ROG, takeoff and landing on the wheels until they get comfortable with it. And then they can remove the wheels and do their hand launching after. And of course, the nice thing also about doing that test flight with the gear on is you're going to get it trimmed out and everything and comfortable with the silhouette and all those things that add complication beyond the hand launch itself. A lot of guys went out with the F-14 and tried to hand launch it the first flight, immediately destroyed it on the hand launch because A, it wasn't trimmed properly, B, they weren't really ready for it, C, they didn't launch it properly. That's a different issue, but I don't like to see people struggle and kill or damage an aircraft on the very first hand launch, having never gotten to fly it before. At least fly it with your wheels installed for maybe at least 1 flight, but really preferably 2 or 3 flights. Now let's talk about who is this model for. This is not obviously for beginners. I'm hoping that everyone understands, because of the plan form and it being black and fast and hard to see, that if you're a first-time RC pilot, absolutely not. If someone comes into your store and they see this on the shelf and they're like, I want to start with this, please do everything in your power to tell them no, 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 no. You will not succeed with that model. I think that's going to be pretty obvious for many people. If they really insist on getting to that sooner than later, I brought today the Habu STS, our smart trainer with safe. We've sold thousands of these over the last couple of years. I know of at least a few dozen people directly, and then there are probably many hundreds of thousands more beyond that learn to fly RC with this as their first ever airplane. This is almost as easy to fly as a high-wing apprentice or an Aero Scout. It's a little different because it's a jet, but we engineered it to be as easy to fly as possible. So that way people who want to fly jets long-term or want to get to the F-14 or the SR-71, they can start here. Now you can't go from this to one of these models. We recommend these aircraft as maybe like a 3rd EDF model. Now I know everybody's a little different. Some people catch on faster than others. They may be able to fly these as their first ever EDFs if they've been flying RC airplanes for 30 years and have, maybe flown giant scale turbine jets. Of course, this could be their first jet, but generally speaking, for the average person who is somewhat new to the hobby If they don't have a couple of jets under their belt, they should not be jumping into these. We have on the box, you'll see there, the red skill level 3. We have skill level 1 is green, that's no experience required. Skill level 2 is yellow, just like a stoplight, because it does require some experience. 3 requires experience. You need to know how to fly high performance EDF jets to be able to fly these models successfully. I know a number of people bought this model, crashed it, then blamed it on the airplane, but unfortunately the reality was they did not have the skills and the experience to fly this class of model. They weren't ready for it yet. Just because these aircraft have SAFE does not mean they are easy to fly. SAFE is a tool, even for an experienced pilot like myself, to help with a few things. It helps you with that hand launch because you have the automatic hand launch assist mode built in. So I use it all the time for launch, hand launching in both models. It helps with orientation. If I lose orientation with either of these airplanes, which has happened to me, both of these aircraft, I've lost orientation on, not entirely certain if I'm upside down or right side up, and I flip SAFE on, it goes right side up, and boom, I know exactly where I'm at. I get the airplane turned back around towards me or wherever, whatever I need to do to regain my composure, flip back out of SAFE select and go. SAFE select is not intended to be a make every airplane easy to fly. I know this is another misconception in the market. We put SAFE in everything because we want every beginner to buy every airplane. That's not true. We do not believe SAFE makes airplanes easier to fly than they genuinely are. Again, it's a tool even for experienced pilots. Or if you're a little less experienced, or you're an experienced pilot and you're nervous, you can use SAFE select as a tool to help get you in the air, keep you in the air. But you should not be relying on SAFE. If you think that you can buy this airplane and fly it in SAFE the whole time and you're gonna be okay because you've never flown a jet before, that's not who this model is for. So, yeah, I see some other recommendations here. 50 hours of high performance flying. That's probably, about accurate. Even if it's a high performance warbird or a pylon racer or something, if you've got, X number of hours, everybody's a little different. Some people catch on faster. Some people have RealFlight at home. They practiced on that. But we recommend, and you'll see in our marketing materials now for these models and for all of our future models, we're now explaining what is that skill level. We're saying a skill level 1 model is for this kind of person, a 2 or 3, which means you should have experience with, and we list some of the E-flite models they should have flown before they get to this model. And in this case, we recommend, if you've never flown before, Habu STS. Even if you have some experience flying, you better already have experience and been successful flying the Habu SS, the 50mm or the 70mm, say the Viper 70, the F-16 70mm. Obviously a Viper 90, if you can fly that, you're probably gonna be able to fly this. But we want people to succeed with these models. We don't want people with too low of skills, too low of experience, thinking, oh, it's got SAFE, I can fly it too. Nope, that's not what SAFE is for in these aircraft. It makes them easier to fly. It makes them the easiest. This is the easiest to fly F-14. I've flown, a number of EDF and even turbine F-14s. This is the easiest to fly of the bunch. I've not flown any other SR-71s, but I'm pretty sure, I'm positive, because I know some of the other guys have, this is the easiest to fly SR-71 that's out there because of SAFE select, but also because it's smaller, it has AS3X and some other things. So, it's just important to note, it's easier to fly, but it's not easy to fly, and it's not for a person that doesn't have the experience they need to succeed with it. So, I know I've been talking a lot, covering a lot of details about the plane and even beyond that, but it's been a while since we've done one of these, so I wanted to make sure you guys kind of know where we're coming from on various things, and some of the things we're changing. Yeah, I see some other comments. Yeah, see, and we're torn on this. We get customers who complain about, I don't want to see another $500, $600, $700 airplane come out from you guys. And then we get people who complain on the opposite side. I'm tired of seeing ultra micros and EDF jets with no retracts and no flaps and this and that. I think what everybody needs to understand, whether you're us, whether you're an enthusiast in the market, whether you're a hobby shop, is there's a whole wide range of people out there that are looking for a wide range of models that fit a wide range of their needs. Some people can only afford $200 and $300 airplanes. Some people can only have the space to store and fly ultra micro or twin 40mm aircraft. Some people only want giant scale. Their eyes aren't so good anymore. They have more time, they have more space, they have more money to spend. We're trying our best to balance a little bit of everything. Every year we come out with about 24 new aircraft. They're all the way from ultra micros up to giant scale. This year alone, we've come out with a couple ultra micros. We had the Hangar 9 20cc Brave. We had the MB339 large scale turbine jet. we do a little bit of everything every year, and it does seem like people have short memories and they often forget that we go all over the place. So you may not like this release, somebody, you know, but they may not realize our next airplane might be exactly the one they've always wanted. So, you know, it's unfortunate that we see people disparage us or the product or the market or whatever it might, or other people, that this is all they can afford and this is what they want because they want something else. We get it. We're trying our best to give models for everybody. You know, I think we're doing a pretty good job of spreading across a range. We want to create a great entry point with our trainers to grow the hobby. We also want people to be able to progress without having to go on the hard learning curve that myself and others had to go on before we had SAFE, before we had foam bind and fly models, before we had EDF jets and there were only turbine jets. And then at the same time, we want to go all the way up to turbine jets, and we want to go up to high-end, you know, 3D foamies, or, you know, wood aircraft, or large-scale 3D helicopters. You see, we recently released the Blade Fusion 550. You know, we're moving up market on helis again because we want to make sure that we have that whole range available. We want to meet as many people as possible. Now, we can't make everyone happy with every release. We know that. But it is, I will say, it gets a little bit disconcerting to see how many people are so negative every time we announce something. In this case, we're teasing it. It's exciting. It's a fun thing. And still we see people saying, oh, I bet it's another UMX. Oh, I bet it's another $600 airplane that I can't afford. Oh, I bet it's another, you know, repaint. I bet it's another timber. I bet it's a 4-motor timber. I bet it's a timber with 8 EDFs on it. Whatever the joke might be. Please, I hope everybody understands that we're trying our best to balance our portfolio, as we call it, because we want to reach a wide audience. We don't want to be shoehorned into just beginners or just intermediate or just high-end. We serve a wide range of customers. You guys, the stores, serve a wide range of customers. We want to try and have a wide range of products. We'll never have all of them for everyone, but we really do want to represent the widest swath of the market that we can. So, you know, I really hope this does well. I'll tell you, man, we've all talked about how awesome a twin 90 of this would be, or a twin 70 or twin 64 with retracts and all the things, but some subject matters have proven to be more successful than others. P51, great example. Doesn't matter, UMX to giant scale, sells great. All the time, every company can have multiple of them and they all sell well. SR-71, we don't know. There haven't been that many out there. We're going to see. F-14 has proven to be pretty good. So, you know, it's got us thinking. Maybe we go a little bit bigger on that. You know, be sure to put some comments on this video if you guys would like to see us move up market or down market. But again, I see that comment here about, you know, no more $500 or more airplanes. I get that. In your store, in your area, that may be the case, that the space you have available, the customer base you have available is just not interested in that, and this is the meat of the market for them. We totally get that. So, somebody also brought up RealFlight. So for those that don't know, if you haven't seen what we did with RealFlight Evolution, we released that late last year. That is the latest and greatest version of RealFlight. It is not changing anytime soon, for years to come. So rather than every year coming out with a different half point of RealFlight, 9, 9.5, you know, 10, 10.5, 11. Evolution is the new base standard. It comes with way more aircraft than any version of RealFlight ever did, over 300 aircraft. It comes with way more flying fields. And now every quarter, instead of waiting a whole year to release new models, a dozen new models like we've done for years and years with RealFlight, now every quarter we can release about a half dozen new models. Some quarters we release 6 new models, some quarters we release 4 new models in a field. The workload's similar for those, without getting into all the details. But our goal with that new process of creating that new content every quarter is allowing us to put models like this into RealFlight in a more timely fashion. Now, you will never be able to buy, well, I wouldn't say never, but let's say it's unlikely you'll be able to buy a RealFlight model of an RC aircraft before the actual airplane's out. You know, we gotta get the airplane out and done and shipped, then we can make the RealFlight model as close as possible to the E-flite model or Hangar 9 model or whatever it might be. That takes a few months' time. So our goal, though, is that the next quarterly content pack that comes out, this is in it. So that way a person who has one can practice with it, a person who's interested in buying one could try it on the sim, you can demonstrate it in your store. For example, that customer comes in, says, hey, I want that as my first airplane. You can walk them over to the sim and say, try it. And if they crash, switch over to the Habu STS and have them try that in beginner mode, and they can then see firsthand the difference in the sim. And so that's our goal with RealFlight from now on. Yeah, Nick, SR-71 is going to be hot, begging for one for years. Let's get a 70 to 90 millimeter in the works. I don't disagree. Yeah, we like having the choice. If you don't sell $500, we don't order them. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I agree. It's good to have the choice. I sell plenty, yeah. I believe it. All right, so before we wrap up here, I know we've gone a little longer than I expected, but a lot of just, oh, I'm loving this conversation. Really good stuff. Some good topics have been brought up, which, you know, we may share this video for those that, some people might see this video down the road. We might download it off of this Facebook Live and then re-upload it to YouTube so more people can see it. But I think there's a lot of things that we've covered. We can't tell you everything that we're doing, everything that we're thinking, but I'm here if you got any questions. Asking how many on the first shipment. I can't tell you exact number. I will say this, and I know this isn't going to be exciting for everyone to hear, but quantities are limited in the first few shipments. I know coming off the Promoto, that is definitely not what dealers want to hear. It's not what we want to hear. We never want to not have enough. But you know, we have some coming already. They're going to be here in the next week or two from the time this is going live or streaming live. They should be shipping around the end of August in the US, and then hopefully in Europe not long after that. We have a follow-up shipment coming in September. I would not be surprised. Personally, me, I think we're going to sell out of these the first day in pre-orders. So I strongly recommend getting your pre-order in first thing tomorrow morning for the dealers that are seeing this now live. It's Wednesday evening. We announce it tomorrow morning. Get your pre-orders in. Get as many in as your pre-order as you can, as you're comfortable. We may be chasing this one, and I know you don't want to hear that, but I just want to be honest and open and upfront with you guys because we're going to do the best we can. We never like to come up short, ever, especially on a new product announcement and launch, but there's different factors that go into play with that. You know, what the factory can get done in a certain amount of time frame. We could have waited a few more months until we got more. But at the same time, it's still flying season. We really wanted to get another airplane out while the weather's still good, so now everybody has to go out and fly this thing in freezing cold temperatures. Although, if it's snowing, you'd probably be able to see it pretty easy since it's black on white, but that's something. Sending Christy an email now. Oh, sounds like they're already ordering more. Yeah, that's a great point, Riders Hobby Shop. He says 1/4 of new RC pilots in our store buy an airplane and RealFlight Evo after we let them fly that model on the sim. Yeah, that's a huge way to sell them on a particular airplane and also, more importantly, sell them on the sim. I just can't. I had this debate. We were at IRCHA last week, the IRCHA Jamboree, which is the biggest helicopter fun fly in the world, and I'm a little rusty when it comes to helicopters. I taught myself to fly helicopters on a simulator way before RealFlight. It was a terrible polygon. Dave Brown, for those that might know that, had basically no physics. It was awful, but it taught me the eye-hand coordination, the orientation that I needed. The first time I went out and flew a helicopter, by my third flight, I was hovering inverted on the ground. And this is in the 90s. And people were like, their minds were blown because how is that possible? I put, you know, X number of hours in on the simulator. I taught myself to hover airplanes on RealFlight. I taught myself almost all the 3D maneuvers that I know on RealFlight. The best 3D airplane pilot, and one of the best, considered to be the best in the world, Jace Ducia, uses RealFlight daily to try new maneuvers, to create new routines, to hone in on you know, the best routine to particular music. It is a phenomenal tool. It is a tool if you use it as a tool. It's entertaining if you want to have fun with it, but everybody, it doesn't matter if you're new to the hobby or you've been in the hobby a long time, I think everybody should have RealFlight Evolution, in my opinion, for a lot of reasons. Yeah, Ryan points out the Dave Brown Flight Sim had the cost estimate after a crash, and you could obliterate a helicopter, and it was like $1,800 or something. It's funny, we've talked about putting that into RealFlight. We have not done it because we don't want to discourage anybody. You can crash 100 times in RealFlight at $100 a pop, and you're saving yourself real money. But we also don't want people to see that, oh my gosh, that crash cost me $100. I can't afford that and get out of the hobby. If you're using RealFlight and crashing on RealFlight, you most definitely are not going to crash as much in the real world, or, well, generally speaking, you won't be crashing as much in the real world. So, yeah, I agree. I don't think we should put it in there. All right, I'm trying to think if we missed anything else. I know there's a lot of information there. This has definitely gone longer than I thought. I'm excited about this subject matter because I've always wanted an RC SR-71. And one thing that's kind of cool is it just looks good. Just sitting there on the workbench, on the shelf. I wouldn't be surprised if some people who never even flew an RC just buy this for a display model. if some guys who aspire to it buy one just to sit and look at it, to give them that motivation to put more time in on RealFlight or on their Habu or whatever they're learning to fly EDFs or RC with. Yeah. Yeah, we could do it as an optional drop down, that cost estimator. That could be a thing. I'll go ahead and unplug this. And so again, that safe switch, it's on that A by default, but you can move that if you want. So I just want to remind everybody of that. Oh, and another quick note, it's a related note. So you guys may have seen that over the last few months and throughout the year, we've been dropping prices on some airplanes because of a couple of factors. The biggest one really being that container shipping costs have gone down. So this one's been out about almost a year now, and the follow-up shipments are going to come in now at much lower shipping costs than they were over a year ago when we got the first ones or whenever they went out. This now has dropped in price from $299 to this is now $269.99 in the bind and fly basic version. The SR-71 is $249.99 in the bind and fly basic version. So now there's a $20 difference. The reason for that is this has the swing wing mechanism, so that does cost more. But the good news is both of these now are about $20, $30 less than they would have been had the shipping costs stayed up. So the nice thing is this has gone down. We did recently drop the price on the Beechcraft D18. That went down $50. That's a big deal. I think that's one of our best flying, just absolute best all-around airplanes. And I know the D18 is exciting subject matter to some, but it's not to others. But I got to tell you, when I let people fly that aren't super excited about it, they love the way it flies and they buy one anyway. We also this week dropped the price on our Hangar 9 plug-and-play aircraft. The PT-19, the P-47, those fun scale models, and also the Ultra Stick, the big wood PMPs from Hangar 9, all went down $50. So now they're at sharper price points, and that's really exciting because that'll help bridge the gap for a lot of people between their E-flite foam airplanes and maybe Hangar 9 wood ARFs. But don't forget, E-flite is not just a foam airplane brand. We did recently come out with the Ultra Stick 1.1 meter wood, and we do have more wood airplanes in the works. Oh, as I'm holding this reminds me, there are a lot of people may look at this long nose and go, oh my gosh, that's going to break off. Now, I'm not saying you can't break it off, but there are carbon reinforcements all the way through this. And then you've got that plastic chine that helps protect the edge to keep it from getting marred up. And then also add stiffness to it. So I mean, this thing is shockingly stiff. And I think you'd be very hard pressed to break the nose off of it. No doubt somebody's gonna crash it hard enough and maybe snap it somehow, some way. Some parts are available, of course, so you can replace it. The nose cone here does come off and to help make it a little bit smaller in the box. Which is interesting. Full Scale actually had replaceable nose cones as well because they had different cones for different duties. If you were just training, they had one that had basically nothing in it. I think they had one that had a camera out on the end for when they were filming for certain missions or recording or taking photos for certain missions. So that is something that some people may lose and or damage. It is rubbery, so it doesn't snap off. We did purposely make that rubber, so it doesn't necessarily come out exactly straight on every one of these nose cones all the time. And if you have it compressed in the box, it'll get bent in a certain way. But yes, this is kind of a nice thing here. I don't think a lot of people are going to need a whole lot of extra parts for this. Extra fins maybe, but it has the extra set of red ones in the box, so I doubt a lot of customers are going to need you to have parts in stock. There's no props to break, so that's kind of nice. That's one benefit of EDFs, of course. And yeah, it's just darn durable. We also have a bunch of other plastic throughout. We've got plastic on the undersides of the nacelles. This particular model, we have flown it without the gear and landed it on pavement. And it's got, I don't know if you can see this in this video, but there's some scuffs on that plastic, that hard plastic that's there, but yeah, that's why we have that plastic there that goes all the way up to the lip here. We've got plastic on the bottom throughout. So even if you're belly landing on not necessarily grass, you should have ample protection there. We do have the servos covered, of course. Keep grass and bits and other things out of there. All right. More challenges accepted. I love it. Oh, I think he's saying challenge accepted to breaking the nose off. Don't do that. Don't do that. Let's try to avoid that if we can. All right, so before we wrap it up, are there any other questions either about this model, the F-14, or any of the other things we've been doing lately? And I know that a lot of us have all had to do some extra things with the recent system transition. We're making progress. I know that almost every day they're making improvements to the website, to the back-end system that we've transitioned to. And 6 months from now, a year from now, we're all gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. And all around it's going to be better than what we had. It's just going to be a little difficult to get there. It's taking us a little longer than we hoped, but please bear with us. We're getting there. We want to get back to, you know, getting those orders in and shipped out same day, and making sure invoices are in the box and you're not getting multiple shipments of small items and so on and so forth. All right, so if you're seeing this video down the road, that when it's not live, I'll put some links in the description to some of the things I talked about, the batteries that I talked about, transmitters I talked about, probably put a link to RealFlight because that's a great training tool. Put a link to the F-14 because I think now more people are gonna look at that as well because it's similar class and we lowered the price on it. The SR-155 charger, which is a great, you know, first smart charger for those that haven't gotten one already. Yeah, really excited for you guys to see the videos for this in action. We will be dropping a preview video on RC Nation later tonight. So we want to help, you know, get some more membership over there on that website, on that you know, kind of forum. It's a great place to just share and talk about RC outside of, you know, typical Facebook where you see everything RC and other things too, and, you know, even web forums where there's a whole lot of different topics being discussed at any given time. So